What if the monsters in your favorite movies, the ancient gods in your history books, and the sudden chaos you see in the daily news were all part of the exact same coordinated spiritual war?
Yeah, that is, I mean, it's a staggering premise to entertain.
Right. Imagine a scenario where every terrifying creature from folklore and literally every major cultural shift wasn't just human imagination or, natural sociology.
Right, but a calculated move by an ancient intelligence designed to basically dismantle the very fabric of reality.
Exactly. And that's what we're going to unpack today on this deep dive. Welcome, everyone. We are plunging straight into the architecture of this idea, heavily utilizing a fascinating critique called the Serpents Chaos Part 1.
Right, by Rand Engelbrecht.
Right.
And to connect the dots between Greek cosmology, Hollywood blockbusters, and geopolitical instability, it requires zooming out to a massive cosmic scale.
It really does. We are framing all of these seemingly disparate elements as localized skirmishes in a single ancient conflict. Now, if you're tuning in, you likely already have a solid grasp on esoteric frameworks and theological deep dives.
Absolutely.
But it's crucial to establish the lens we are looking through today. This material operates from an uncompromising, hardline biblical worldview.
Very hardline. It views history, media, and politics through this really strict dichotomy of divine order versus demonic rebellion.
Right. And we need to be clear here. We aren't here to preach this worldview as gospel truth, nor are we here to cynically debunk it,
Exactly. As your guides, we are not taking sides. We're impartially exploring the author's arguments to help you understand these concepts.
Yeah, we are stepping inside this framework to map out its logic, decode the ancient texts it relies upon, and basically understand the intricate connections it draws between antiquity and your living room television.
And stepping inside that framework requires us to first recalibrate our vocabulary, specifically our understanding of the word chaos.
Oh, this part blew my mind, because modern usage has completely diluted the concept, hasn't it?
It really has. I mean, when people mention chaos today, they're usually describing like a traffic jam.
Right. Or a disorganized schedule, or the aftermath of a toddler's birthday party.
Exactly. It's treated as this passive state of messiness. But tracing the etymology reveals a much darker, much more terrifying origin.
Let's dig into that. So the English word originates from the ancient Greek chaos.
Right. And it did not mean a jumbled mess. It meant an abyss, like a yawning, terrifying chasm of nothingness.
Wow. And in Greek cosmology, chaos was the primordial void that preceded everything.
Yes. And it was inextricably linked to Tartarus, which is the deepest, most unfathomable pit of the underworld.
So how did we get from a terrifying underworld abyss to, just a messy room?
Well, it wasn't until much later, around the 1400s and then into the 1600s, that the definition began to morph.
Right. There was that massive cultural revival of classical Roman literature during that era.
Exactly. Particularly the works of the poet Ovid.
Ovid.
Yeah, in his epic Metamorphoses, Ovid redefined this primordial state. He didn't describe it as an empty void, but rather as, well, the Latin is rudis indigestat mollis.
Which translates to what exactly?
A rough, unordered, and formless mass. So English speakers absorbed this Roman nuance, and the word gradually broadened into the general concept of utter confusion.
Okay, so understanding that linguistic shift is paramount. Because within the framework we're exploring today, chaos is never a passive accident.
Never. It is an engineered weapon.
The text posits that chaos is actively authored by a distinct intelligence, the Lord of Darkness or Satan.
Right. Following his expulsion from the divine realm, his primary objective became the deliberate injection of this primordial abyss into human existence.
And to grasp the mechanics of this, we have to contrast it with the fundamental nature of the biblical God, which is absolute order.
Absolute order. You see this dynamic established in the very first verses of Genesis.
Right. Before the 6 days of creation, the earth is described in Hebrew as tohu wabohu.
Yes, which translates roughly to formless and void. It's a wasteland of primordial emptiness and darkness.
So that is the baseline state of the universe without divine intervention. It's only when the Creator speaks, when the frequency of divine intent interacts with the void, that light and structure are established.
The underlying theology here is that God is the exclusive source of order. Remove him from the equation, and reality doesn't just sit still.
It actively collapses back into tohu wabohu.
Exactly. And that collapse is the definition of spiritual anarchy.
Okay, let's unpack this a bit more, because the premise suggests that God's eternal laws, like the Ten Commandments, aren't just arbitrary rules designed to ruin human fun.
No, not at all. They are the structural integrity of reality itself. They're basically the metaphysical gravity holding human civilization together.
Wow. So when a society actively severs its anchor to those divine laws, it initiates a process of devolution.
Right. And interestingly, the text points out that this devolution doesn't immediately look like apocalyptic fire and brimstone.
What does it look like then?
It usually begins with narcissism.
That is fascinating, because if you reject a higher divine order, human nature abhors a vacuum. You don't just worship nothing.
You inevitably turn the altar inward. You begin worshiping the self.
Right, this intense narcissism, this cultural obsession with fulfilling every carnal desire, curating your personal truth, and prioritizing the ego over absolute reality.
And in this framework, that's not just a character flaw. It's a direct symptom of demonic chaos taking root in a culture.
And the strategic value of this narcissism for dark spiritual forces is profound. The ultimate objective is to compel humanity to exchange objective truth for pseudo-reality.
Exactly. You can't simply approach a functioning, morally grounded society and demand they embrace pure destruction.
Right, they'd reject it immediately.
Right, you have to disorient them first. By weaponizing chaos, you create this pervasive atmosphere of fear, moral relativism, and chronic instability.
So when the nuclear family fragments, when institutional trust evaporates, and when basic realities are treated as subjective, humanity becomes incredibly vulnerable.
It does. And let's look at how the biblical text illustrates the reality of this chaotic realm.
Oh yes, the narrative in the Gospel of Luke, chapter 8.
Right. Jesus encounters a man possessed by a multitude of demonic entities.
And when interrogated, the entities identify themselves as legion.
Yes, but the fascinating detail is their reaction to divine authority. They don't just flee.
They explicitly beg Jesus not to command them to depart into the abyss.
Exactly. They are terrified of being banished back to that original Greek concept of chaos, the bottomless pit.
So this interaction is utilized to demonstrate that these entities operate out of and are intrinsically linked to the realm of chaos.
And their interaction with the physical dimension manifests as the severe mental and societal instability we witness globally.
Think of it like operating a deep-sea submersible.
Oh, I like this analogy.
Yeah, so the ocean's crushing pressure is the natural state of the abyss. That's the chaos. The submersible's reinforced titanium hull is the divine order, the absolute laws keeping you alive.
Right.
If you decide the hull is too restrictive, if you feel it's limiting your freedom to experience the ocean, and you unlatch the hatch, you don't achieve freedom.
No, you achieve immediate catastrophic implosion. The water violently reclaims the space.
Exactly. The text suggests human society is that submersible. The moment we unlatch the hatch of divine order, the chaos doesn't politely knock. It violently floods our culture.
And this flooding isn't viewed as a series of unfortunate historical accidents.
Right. The framework traces a highly specific timeline.
It argues that this implosion was intentionally engineered within modern Western culture, beginning in earnest during the mid-20th century.
Which brings us to the 1950s and 60s. They're often viewed through a lens of sociological evolution, right? A natural generational pendulum swinging away from post-war austerity.
But here, those cultural shifts are analyzed as a deliberate, demonically coordinated social revolution.
Aimed directly at dismantling the structural integrity of the West. It is referred to in the text as the occult revival.
Right. We are analyzing the massive explosion of the counterculture movement, the mainstreaming of psychedelic hallucinogens, the sexual revolution, and events like Woodstock.
And the text scrutinizes the music of the era, too, specifically examining the lyrical and symbolic content of bands like Black Sabbath and Led Zeppelin.
Yeah, and the argument is that this wasn't merely edgy, rebellious entertainment. It was a calculated spiritual offensive.
Designed to mass-market paganism, witchcraft, and the occult to an entire generation of impressionable youth.
And you cannot talk about that era without addressing the colossal influence of Aleister Crowley.
Oh, absolutely. Crowley was this English occultist, ceremonial magician, and the founder of the religion of Thelema.
And his defining maxim, which completely permeated the 60s counterculture and was openly embraced by massive rock icons, was, "Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law."
And within this biblical framework, Crowley's maxim is the ultimate distilled essence of Satan's agenda.
It is the absolute rejection of God's objective moral framework in favor of unchecked, subjective carnal desire.
It is literally the unlatching of the submersible's hatch.
Exactly. But taking that philosophy and broadcasting it globally required an infrastructure.
Which brings us to a really striking etymological breakdown of the entertainment industry. Specifically, the very name Hollywood.
This part is so fascinating.
It really is. The name literally translates to the land of the holly bush. But if you delve into ancient Celtic and Norse Druidic practices, the wood of the holly tree, known as tin in the Celtic alphabet, was considered profoundly sacred.
Right. It possessed specific metaphysical properties in their lore, utilized primarily for protection and for directing spiritual energy.
And druids and practitioners of witchcraft specifically harvested branches of the holly tree to craft magic wands.
Magic wands. Tools designed to manipulate the physical world by commanding spiritual forces.
So the metaphor the text constructs here is visceral. Hollywood is not merely a geographic location.
No, it is literally functioning as a magic wand for the adversary.
Wow. An instrument of mass enchantment, casting a spell of gradual desensitization over the global population.
And the mechanics of this desensitization are so insidious because the do what thou wilt philosophy didn't just stay at Woodstock.
Right. It matured, put on a suit, and became the cultural norm.
The framework traces a direct causal line from the occult revival of the 70s to the current hypersexualization of media.
The normalization of pornography, the aggressive deconstruction of traditional gender binaries, and the overarching dominance of secular humanism.
It basically operates on the principle of the Overton window. You push the boundary of acceptable behavior inch by inch.
Through compelling narratives and charismatic characters, until behaviors that were once considered taboo or even spiritually fatal become celebrated as progressive milestones.
Now, if you are sitting here thinking this sounds a bit reactionary.
Yeah, playing devil's advocate here. Wait, so is every teenager who throws up the horns at a heavy metal concert or binges a fantasy series about wizards actively conducting a demonic ritual?
Well, the text actually addresses that skepticism directly.
Because I would normally argue that sometimes a catchy guitar riff is just a catchy guitar riff. Human beings naturally push boundaries.
Sure, but the framework's counter-argument is that personal intent is almost irrelevant to the larger spiritual mechanism.
How so?
The demonic realm operates by utilizing these cultural tools as a smokescreen. The teenager listening to the record might genuinely believe they are just expressing anti-establishment angst.
But by participating in that specific frequency of rebellion, they are unknowingly fueling a massive coordinated macro trend.
Exactly. They are adding their localized energy to the broader societal shift away from divine law.
And toward the chaotic worship of the self. So the individual's ignorance of the ritual does not negate the efficacy of the ritual.
That's a perfect way to put it. Once a culture becomes completely saturated with imagery and philosophies that celebrate rebellion, the atmosphere changes.
It creates a fertile spiritual breeding ground for literal demonic oppression on a mass scale.
And this atmospheric change sets the stage for a phenomenon the material identifies as the Dark Awakening.
The Dark Awakening. We are culturally conditioned to view spiritual awakenings as inherently positive, right? Like a pursuit of higher consciousness or inner peace.
But the warning here is stark. When this innate human hunger for the supernatural is disconnected from the parameters of the biblical God, it becomes a perilous trap.
Right. People turn to New Age philosophies, Kabbalah, spirit channeling, astrology, all under the guise of enlightenment.
And the premise asserts that they are not finding inner light. They are unwittingly acting as locksmiths, opening portals for dark entities to access their lives.
Just look at the massive, almost inexplicable resurgence in the cultural obsession with the paranormal.
It's everywhere. Television is saturated with ghost hunting reality shows. Social media heavily promotes tarot card readers, psychics, and mediums.
And there is a profound historical irony here, which the text points out. In the early 20th century, brilliant minds like Harry Houdini dedicated immense resources to exposing the fraudulent practices of mediums.
Right. The intellectual consensus of the time largely dismissed these practices as predatory scams targeting the grieving.
Yet a century later, in an era that prides itself on empirical science, we have completely re-embraced the concept of communicating with the dead.
Repackaging it as casual, thrilling entertainment.
And the theological friction here is severe. Within the biblical texts, such practices are not treated as harmless parlor tricks.
No, absolutely not. The Book of Deuteronomy, specifically chapter 18, contains explicit prohibitions against divination, sorcery, interpreting omens, and consulting mediums.
The text views these acts as spiritual abominations that invite severe judgment.
Yet the modern entertainment apparatus takes these forbidden practices and builds massive franchises around them, like Medium or Ghost Whisperer,
Completely neutralizing the perceived spiritual danger. It's the frog in boiling water, really. The culture was slowly heated up until occultism felt normal.
And here's where it gets really interesting. The mechanism of this dark awakening becomes even more pronounced when we examine the modern psychedelic renaissance.
Yes, there is a highly funded, culturally celebrated push to utilize mind-altering hallucinogens, psilocybin, ayahuasca, DMT, to process trauma and achieve cosmic consciousness.
But to understand the critique of this movement, we have to look at the original Greek language used in the New Testament.
Right, the word frequently translated into English as witchcraft or sorcery is pharmakia.
Which is the direct etymological root of our modern words, pharmacy and pharmaceuticals.
In the ancient world, sorcery wasn't just chanting words. It heavily involved the administration of mind-altering potions and toxins to chemically force the brain into a state of trance.
Think of the Oracle of Delphi inhaling the vaporous fumes to induce a dissociative state and channel the entity Apollo.
The text connects that ancient methodology directly to the modern push for psychedelic therapy.
It argues that using these chemical substances to forcefully pry open the doors of perception doesn't expand your consciousness into a benevolent universe.
It chemically induces pharmakeia, deliberately bypassing the mind's natural spiritual defenses and inviting severe demonic infiltration.
And this specific vulnerability ties into the deeply unsettling research of the late pastor Russ Dizdar.
Oh, wow, yes. His work on the Black Awakening is heavily referenced here.
Dizdar spent decades investigating the intersection of severe trauma, occult rituals, and mind control.
His premise suggests the existence of a highly organized underground satanic network operating on a global scale.
And Dizdar's theory delves into the terrifying mechanics of psychological dissociation.
Right. When a human mind is subjected to unfathomable ritualistic trauma, it cannot process the pain, so it splinters.
It creates amnesic walls and compartmentalizes the personality into distinct alters to survive.
Wait, so they're intentionally splitting the personality?
Exactly. Dizdar proposed that this occult network deliberately utilizes this trauma-based mind control to create these splintered personalities.
Which are then systematically inhabited by demonic entities. He referred to them as satanic supersoldiers.
Yes. Individuals living seemingly normal lives, but programmed with dormant, violent alters that can be triggered simultaneously to unleash chaos during the end times.
I mean, while it sounds like the plot of an espionage thriller, the material treats this as a grim, documented spiritual reality.
It represents the absolute weaponization of the human psyche.
And a crucial question arises from all this. As this highly coordinated dark awakening is executing its strategies, what is the counterforce doing? Where is the modern church?
The critique leveled at the modern ecclesiastical structure is withering,
to say the least.
The argument is that over the last several decades, large swaths of the church have completely abandoned their martial spiritual mandate,
transforming instead into glorified social clubs or self-help seminars.
Rather than identifying and combating this escalating spiritual war, many pulpits are preaching a sanitized secular humanism.
They've adopted New Age concepts like the law of attraction or the manifestation of wealth, superficially baptized them with Christian terminology, and sold them to the masses.
And the author views this as a catastrophic dereliction of duty, leaving the congregation entirely defenseless against the sophisticated spiritual weaponry being deployed against them.
The normalization of the occult has been so gradual and so masterfully executed through entertainment that the broader culture and the church finds outright witchcraft perfectly acceptable.
The spiritual immune system of society has been entirely compromised.
And this normalization isn't just about making tarot cards seem trendy. The material goes into excruciating detail about the literal monsters of our folklore.
This part completely upends the anthropological view of mythology. We are taught that ancient civilizations invented gods and monsters to explain natural phenomena they didn't understand.
Right, like thunder, crop failures, or disease.
But the central thesis here completely rejects that. The premise asserts that the ancient gods of the Egyptian, Greek, Norse, and Roman pantheons are not the byproduct of primitive imaginations.
And they are not fictional archetypes.
No, they are historical records of literal demonic entities. Fallen angels, principalities, and powers that physically and spiritually interacted with humanity in antiquity.
Let's break down some of the specific deities analyzed in the text. Take Apophis, the ancient Egyptian deity representing chaos and darkness.
Apophis is consistently depicted in their hieroglyphs as a colossal, terrifying snake or serpent demon.
Then you move to ancient Mesopotamia and find Tiamat, the primordial goddess of the sea and chaos, often represented as a massive dragon.
And you can trace this chaotic frequency to the Norse pantheon with Loki, the god of mischief and ruin, cited as a direct manifestation of this same demonic force.
But one of the most compelling connections involves Asclepius, the Greco-Roman god of medicine and healing.
Asclepius is a fascinating case study. His universal symbol is a serpent entwined around a staff.
And that exact symbol, the rod of Asclepius, is still the dominant logo for global medical organizations today.
According to the myth, Zeus eventually struck Asclepius down with a thunderbolt, but then placed him in the heavens as the constellation Ophiuchus,
which literally translates to the serpent bearer.
The framework argues that the omnipresence of snake and dragon motifs across completely disparate ancient cultures is not a collective psychological archetype.
It's a shared, terrifying historical reality. Humanity was documenting actual encounters with the ancient serpent Satan and his high-ranking fallen angels, masquerading as divine beings to demand worship.
And to substantiate these claims, the material leans heavily into the ancient extra-biblical text known as the Book of Enoch.
Right. While not included in the standard canonical Bible, Enoch was profoundly influential in early Jewish mysticism and early Christian theology.
And a massive portion of Enoch is dedicated to detailing the history of the Watchers.
The mechanics of the Watchers narrative are so vital here. According to Enoch, the Watchers were an elite class of angels who made a conscious pact on Mount Hermon to rebel.
They descended into the physical dimension and mated with human women.
And the resulting offspring from this unholy genetic union were a race of monstrous, violent giants known as the Nephilim.
But the rebellion wasn't just genetic, it was informational. The Book of Enoch details how these specific fallen angels share highly guarded, forbidden heavenly technologies with humanity.
The text specifically highlights an angel named Azazel. Azazel is credited with teaching humanity the art of metallurgy, specifically how to forge swords, knives, shields, and breastplates.
He essentially jump-started the military-industrial complex. But crucially, in the exact same breath, Azazel taught humanity how to make cosmetics, mirrors, and bracelets.
Think about the strategic brilliance of that. He introduces the machinery of mass bloodshed and the machinery of intense vanity and seduction simultaneously.
Exactly. He equips humanity to destroy itself through war and corrupt its bloodline through lust.
Other fallen angels are listed as teaching the secrets of astrology, the severing of roots for sorcery, and the reading of the stars.
So the premise is that human civilization didn't naturally evolve these destructive technologies and occult practices.
They were deliberately seeded by demonic entities intent on accelerating humanity's self-destruction.
And the terrifying creatures of ancient folklore, the ogres, giants, and sea serpents, are interpreted through this lens as distorted cultural memories of these actual demonic beings and their Nephilim offspring.
The text provides highly specific, grotesque descriptions from mythology to illustrate this point. It lists some incredibly bizarre entities.
Like the Chakadri from the Book of Enoch. These aren't your standard cherubim.
No, they are described as mythical creatures possessing the head of a crocodile, the feet and tail of a lion, and 12 wings, appearing as massive, flying bronze serpents.
The material also references Amit from the Egyptian pantheon. Amit was known as the devourer of the dead.
And she is depicted as a chimeric horror, the head of a crocodile, the torso of a lion, and the hindquarters of a hippopotamus.
Which were the three largest man-eating animals known to the ancient Egyptians.
And this phenomenon isn't confined to the Mediterranean or the Middle East. The text analyzes the Pontianak, a deeply feared vampiric ghost from Malay mythology.
And it looks at the Nuckalaivi from Scottish folklore.
Right. A hideous, skinless, horse-like sea demon whose breath wilts crops and causes plagues.
The overarching point is that cultures completely isolated from one another were all terrorized by distinct variations of the exact same demonic manifestations.
Which leads to a harsh critique of modern media. Because if these entities were real, where did they go?
The author's answer is that they never left. They simply executed a massive rebranding campaign.
So, the modern cultural obsession with vampires, from the gothic horror of Dracula to the highly romanticized depictions in True Blood and Twilight.
Alongside the endless fascination with werewolves, zombies, and shapeshifters, they are not viewed as harmless, creative horror tropes.
The text insists these are modernized, sanitized depictions of actual demonic possession, ancient blood-drinking rituals, and the complete hijacking of human agency.
But the obvious question is, why the rebrand?
Right. If you are an unimaginably powerful, terrifying entity from the abyss, why disguise yourself as a brooding, sparkly vampire or a misunderstood werewolf?
The answer lies in the spiritual mechanics of legal ground. The framework operates on the principle that demons, despite their power, are bound by certain cosmic laws.
They cannot simply possess an individual against their will. They require an entry point, a legal permission slip, so to speak.
Exactly, because if a demonic entity manifests in your living room as a skinless Scottish sea monster radiating pure hatred, the human reaction is sheer terror.
The immediate instinct is to run and cry out to God for protection. Pure terror closes the door.
Nobody is inviting the Knuckleavy into their home, and certainly nobody is fantasizing about dating it.
Precisely. So by rebranding these entities as sympathetic, deeply romantic, or culturally cool through Hollywood media, humanity's innate spiritual defense mechanisms are bypassed.
The fear is meticulously extracted and replaced with affinity, fascination, and even sexual attraction.
And the argument asserts that by idolizing these creatures, by purchasing the merchandise and making them the objects of romantic fantasy, humanity willingly, legally invites that specific demonic frequency into their lives.
The mass possession of a culture becomes possible because the populace has been seduced into loving the very entities designed to destroy them.
So if you are a listener who just enjoys curling up on the couch on a Friday night with a bowl of popcorn and a good scary movie, this framework presents a deeply unsettling reality.
It does. It asks, are you inadvertently signing a spiritual contract with the underworld?
And the text leans heavily toward yes.
Yeah.
It argues that actively exposing your mind and spirit to media that glorifies the occult effectively paints a spiritual target on your back.
It doesn't mean watching one vampire movie results in instant head-spinning possession.
Right. Rather, it initiates a slow process of spiritual corruption and desensitization. It signals a willingness to engage with the darkness, thereby granting it a foothold.
Now, while the demonic realm uses these pop culture monsters to seduce the general masses, it employs a completely different, highly sophisticated vocabulary to ensnare the elites.
The intellectuals, the architects of society. This brings into focus the role of secret societies, esoteric philosophies, and the grand illusion of self-devocation.
The material turns a spotlight on esoteric organizations that have historically operated in the shadows, seducing the influential by claiming to possess secret ancient knowledge.
We are talking about the philosophical underpinnings of Luciferianism, Satanism, Freemasonry, and highly influential occult groups, like the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn.
For context, the Golden Dawn was founded in London in 1888 and became the absolute bedrock for modern 20th century ceremonial magic.
Heavily influencing figures we've already discussed, like Aleister Crowley.
And the text makes a critical distinction here that is often conflated in mainstream discussions. It delineates between the philosophies of Satanism and Luciferianism.
Right. In the broader occult sphere, Satanism is typically associated with the worship of the adversary in a very carnal sense.
The embrace of the dark, the grotesque, and the blatant rejection of traditional morality. It is the worship of the beast.
But Luciferianism is much more insidious. Adherents of Luciferianism do not view Lucifer as a figure of evil or darkness.
They worship him under his original moniker, the bringer of light.
In this philosophy, Lucifer is venerated as the ultimate symbol of human autonomy, intellectual enlightenment, and the great liberator who freed humanity from an oppressive creator god.
It appeals deeply to intellectuals because it is framed as the pursuit of ultimate knowledge and freedom.
But the framework we are analyzing shuts down that distinction with absolute prejudice.
It argues that whether you are practicing carnal Satanism or intellectual Luciferianism, you are being manipulated by the exact same entity.
The text relies on the warnings of the Apostle Paul, who wrote that Satan masterfully disguises himself as an angel of light.
The promise of intellectual enlightenment is merely a different, sweeter flavor of the exact same spiritual poison.
And this deceptive promise of enlightenment ties perfectly into the author's deep dive into Gnostic chaos.
To understand this, we really have to look at Gnosticism. It was a massive spiritual movement in the early centuries of the church that threatened to completely consume Orthodox theology.
Gnostic cosmology teaches a highly specific dualistic creation myth. They believe the physical material world we inhabit is inherently evil, flawed, and corrupt.
Crucially, they believed it was not created by the true supreme god, but by an ignorant lesser creator god known as the Demiurge.
Often identified by Gnostics as the God of the Old Testament.
Right, and the Gnostic mythos posited that humans are spiritual beings who carry a divine spark of the true high god, but that spark is tragically trapped inside the evil meat sack of the physical body.
Imprisoned within the Demiurge's flawed matrix. Therefore, salvation in Gnosticism has nothing to do with repentance or the cross.
Salvation is achieved solely through gnosis, an acquisition of secret, elite, inner spiritual knowledge.
Once you achieve gnosis, you realize your own inherent divinity and can eventually escape the material prison.
The author points out that this complex Gnostic worldview is just a highly intellectualized repackaging of the devil's original lie in the Garden of Eden.
When the serpent tempted Eve, the core argument wasn't about an apple. It was a philosophical proposition. The serpent said, "Eat this, your eyes will be opened, and you will be like God."
You will be like God. That is the foundational lie of all chaos.
The premise posits that the core existential crisis of humanity, whether it's expressed through Middle Age alchemy, 19th century secret societies, or modern philosophies, always stems from this singular desire.
The attempt to usurp God's dominion and enthrone ourselves as the supreme rulers of our reality.
The adversary is entirely indifferent to how you express your rebellion, as long as the end result is the rejection of the true God.
And the material brilliantly maps this ancient Gnostic lie onto modern secular movements. It offers a scathing critique of humanism,
which successfully relocated the center of the moral universe from the throne of God to human reason and ethics.
It examines social Darwinism's survival of the fittest as a ruthless philosophy that justifies the strong dominating the weak in the endless pursuit of human evolution.
And the text extends this critique directly into the 21st century, issuing a severe warning about the modern technological push to literally build gods through artificial intelligence.
It examines the transhumanist movement, a heavily funded ideology that openly seeks to conquer death, merge human consciousness with machines, and achieve digital immortality.
It is the ultimate Gnostic dream, right? Escaping the flawed biological body using our own elite knowledge, completely bypassing the need for a savior.
The material takes a sweeping, highly critical look at the last 500 years of Western intellectual history. It challenges the revered eras of the Renaissance, the Enlightenment, and the Age of Reason.
The author views culturally canonized thinkers like Charles Darwin, Karl Marx, and Sigmund Freud not as brave pioneers of human progress, but as the architects of massive intellectual towers of Babel.
Their collective philosophies were designed to methodically erase the metaphysical God from the consciousness of society, leaving man completely alone, answering only to himself.
And the psychological and societal result of this erasure is what the text calls the existential crisis of chaos.
When humanity successfully removes the creator from the equation, it doesn't inherit a utopia of rational freedom. It removes the very anchor of meaning, purpose, and order.
Humanity finds itself adrift in a hostile, chaotic universe, entirely of its own making, battered by the storms of moral relativism and spiritual decay.
So, if we accept the premise that the world is a churning, chaotic battleground of engineered cultural revolutions, manipulative secret societies, and ancient demonic entities, how does the author suggest anyone survives this?
This brings us to the ultimate resolution presented in the text: the clash between the kingdom of order and the kingdom of chaos, and the inescapable final choice required of every human being.
The author strips away all the nuance and complexity of politics and philosophy, boiling the entire human experience down to a brutal conflict between two opposing spiritual kingdoms currently exerting massive influence on Earth.
You have the kingdom of light, ruled by the Creator, which is characterized entirely by peace, absolute order, objective truth, and life.
And in direct opposition, you have the kingdom of darkness, ruled by the adversary, characterized entirely by chaos, confusion, deception, destruction, and death.
In the context of this spiritual war, there are no neutral territories. There is no Switzerland.
To comprehend the mechanics of how this war is fought, the text delves heavily into the biblical concept of dominion.
According to the Genesis narrative, when God created the earth, He didn't just place humans on it as an afterthought. He explicitly gave dominion, legal authority, stewardship, and rulership over the physical realm to mankind.
Humans hold the lease to the earth.
And because humanity holds that legal authority, the earth itself is the ultimate prize in this cosmic war.
Satan cannot simply seize control of the planet by brute force. He does not have the legal right.
He can only operate, manipulate, and inject chaos into the earth because humanity has continually handed him the keys.
Every time humanity sins, every time we rebel against divine order, engage in idolatry, or participate in the occult, we are effectively subleasing our God-given territory to the Lord of Chaos.
Therefore, the author's solution to this global spiritual and cultural crisis is radical and uncompromising. Humanity must execute a complete paradigm shift and return to what the text calls the Ancient of Days,
A majestic biblical title for God, and submit entirely to the ancient ways.
The metaphor of the two trees in the Garden of Eden is utilized to explain this. The author asserts that for millennia, humanity has been gorging itself on the fruit of the tree of knowledge. We have relied exclusively on our own intellect, our own scientific advancements, and our own subjective philosophies, desperately trying to construct a utopia where we are our own gods.
And the devastating results of that diet are evident in the news every single day. The proposed solution is to violently turn our backs on the tree of knowledge and aggressively seek the tree of life.
In this framework, the tree of life represents seeking absolute spiritual union, obedience, and intimacy with the Creator above all earthly pursuits or intellectual understanding.
The material acknowledges the immense difficulty of this pivot. It discusses the intense tension of denying the self and wearing the true crown.
Human beings spend their entire lives constructing their egos, building their reputations, and defending their personal microscopic kingdoms. But the author draws a powerful image from the book of Revelation chapter 4. In that apocalyptic vision, the 24 elders in heaven, who represent immense authority, take their golden crowns and literally cast them at the feet of God,
physically demonstrating that all glory, intellect, and power belong exclusively to him.
That imagery represents the ultimate agonizing test for modern humanity. Are we willing to take the crown of our own self-deification, the crown woven from our intellect, our autonomy, and our pride, and cast it completely at the feet of the Creator?
The author's warning is dire. If we stubbornly refuse to relinquish our crowns of self-honor, we will inevitably find ourselves wearing a crown of absolute chaos.
However, alongside that dire warning, the author promises profound, supernatural relief for those who do submit.
The text addresses the modern epidemic of mental anguish. We are living in a world plagued by unprecedented levels of depression, clinical anxiety, and suicidal ideation.
The framework analyzes this not merely as a biochemical or medical crisis, but as a severe existential and spiritual crisis.
We are eternal souls desperately trying to function in a chaotic, hostile environment, while our internal spirit remains entirely disconnected from its life source.
The mechanics of this relief are explained through the original divine order of human creation. According to the text, a human is a tripartite being.
God relates directly to the human spirit, the pneuma.
And the human spirit is designed to govern and direct the soul, the psyche, which consists of our mind, our will, and our emotions.
And the soul, in turn, is designed to direct the physical body, the soma.
When mankind originally rebelled in Eden, that perfect hierarchy was shattered. The spirit was compromised and cut off from God.
Consequently, the soul, now driven entirely by flawed human intellect and volatile carnal emotion usurped control.
The immense psychological and emotional torment of modern life is the direct result of that internal spiritual inversion. Submitting to the Ancient of Days restores the original divine hierarchy: spirit, then soul, then body.
The author claims this restoration is the singular path to achieving true, lasting peace in a world actively dissolving into chaos.
It is vital to recognize how the author completely reframes the concept of submission. The secular modern worldview views submitting to strict divine laws as a tragic loss of personal freedom,
a pathetic enslavement to archaic rules.
But the author brilliantly flips that narrative upside down. If the world is actually ruled by a deceptive, chaotic adversary who utilizes media, cultural shifts, and elite philosophies to enslave humanity in darkness and misery,
then submitting to God is not enslavement. It is the ultimate act of rebellion. Choosing God's order is the only true, effective escape from the enslaving matrix of chaos.
We have covered an immense amount of ground today. We started by plunging into the murky, terrifying Greek origins of the abyss, uncovering the true nature of primordial chaos.
We explored the deeply unsettling historical concept that Hollywood might literally be utilizing the druidic mechanics of the holly bush to wave wands of desensitization over the global populace.
We dissected the horrifying possibility that the ancient, terrifying demons of antiquity never left. They simply executed a masterclass in public relations, rebranding themselves as sexy vampires and misunderstood monsters to trick a spiritually blind culture into inviting them inside.
And finally, we laid out the author's stark, uncompromising view of the ultimate spiritual war for human dominion. A war that offers no neutral ground and demands we choose between the chaotic altar of our own egos and submission to the Ancient of Days.
It is a framework that systematically dismantles the comfort of modern secularism. It demands that you critically re-examine every piece of media you assumed was harmless entertainment.
And every philosophical movement you thought was just the natural progression of society. It forces you to view all of them as active, contested battlegrounds in an ancient, ongoing war for the human soul.
Which leaves us with a final, unavoidable thought. If the architecture of this worldview is accurate, if every single piece of media you consume, every cultural movement you align with, and every philosophical idea you entertain is actually a calculated strategic move by an ancient intelligence fighting a cosmic war for your soul, how does that change the way you interact with the world tonight? When you sit down in your living room, dim the lights, and press play on your favorite show, are you just passively consuming a story? Or are you, willingly and completely unknowingly, unlatching the hatch and staring straight into the abyss? Thank you for joining us on this exploration of the source material. Stay curious, stay observant, and keep diving deep.